You can receive many good things from many different forms, but perhaps the warmest things are when we accidentally receive kindness from someone unfamiliar. And whenever you want to say, "It's not my problem," when you see someone in need of help, the stories below can remind you to think again. We are living in a world full of negative news. Personal philosophies revolve around. We need to make every effort to improve in all aspects. Time is money. Be careful not to be taken advantage of when help others. But perhaps we forget one thing, that we ourselves sometimes need help. And if you are the one being helped in the situations below, you will feel the tears. Personal happiness when realizing kind things always exist, even among strangers. What do the difficulties and challenges leave behind? The shortest way to escape hardship is to go through it. A young man is facing many difficulties. He is hurt and has lost faith in life. He went to ask a wise old man after hearing the story. He didn't say a word, but just silently put the pot on the stove, poured some water into the pot, and put in a carrot, a lump of salt, and an egg. After boiling, he opened the lid and silently looked at him. After a while, he began to speak. Everyone living in this world must go through difficulties and challenges. But the important thing is what will happen after that. Look at the lump of salt that looks solid on the outside, but when put in water, it dissolves. The sturdy carrot also becomes soft when heated. Although the egg is fragile, when it passes through hot boiling water, it becomes stronger. A challenge can also become a golden opportunity when we know how to grasp and turn it around. The story of building the Brooklyn Bridge. Never, never, never surrender. Winston Churchill. The Brooklyn Bridge, spanning the river between the cities of Manhattan and Brooklyn, must be said to be a miracle of the construction industry. In 1883. A creative engineer named John Roebling was filled with excitement when he came up with the idea of building a spectacular bridge across these two cities. However, when hearing him present that bold idea, no road and bridge expert was willing to cooperate with him. They thought he was crazy and told him to forget it because it was impossible to build such a bridge. Undeterred, he went home to convince his son Washington, also a potential engineer, that such a bridge could be built. Both father and son cherished the desire to complete the bridge and discussed how to overcome all obstacles. Anyway, the banks believed them and agreed to spend money on the bridge construction project. With great excitement and enthusiasm, they recruited workers and began building the bridge of their dreams. The project was underway for a few months when disaster struck. An accident at the construction site claimed the life of Mr. John Roebling, and his son suffered serious head injuries. After that accident, Washington was unable to walk or speak. Everyone thought that the project would eventually go up in smoke because Roebling and his son were the only ones who understood how to build this bridge. Although he could not walk or talk, Washington Roebling's mind was still very sharp. One day, while lying in the hospital, he suddenly thought of a way to talk to others. The only movement of his body right now is moving a finger, and he came up with a set of communication codes. With this code, he used his moving finger to type out his thoughts into his wife's hand to inform her of what to say to the engineers who were continuing to build the bridge for 13 years. Washington gave orders with his only moving finger until the magnificent Brooklyn Bridge we see today was completed. You will discover yourself at a higher level each time you overcome adversity. Lessons from a martial arts teacher. Most happiness or unhappiness is determined by your personality, not by circumstances. Martha Washington. A 10-year-old boy decided to learn judo even though he lost his left arm in a car accident. He studied judo with a Japanese master. Because he believed that he had studied very diligently and made progress, he wondered why, after 3 months of training, the teacher only taught him one martial art style. Finally, unable to be patient anymore, the boy asked his teacher, "Teacher, "Can't I learn other martial arts?" He replied, "This is the only martial art I taught you, and it is also the only martial art you need to learn." Although he did not understand all the teacher's words, trusting him, the boy continued to practice. Months later, his master took him to a judo competition. The boy was surprised to see that he easily won the first 2 matches. The third match was more difficult, but after a while, the opponent lost patience in his attacks. The boy cleverly used martial arts and won. Still not surprised by his success, he confidently entered the final. This time, his opponent is a taller, stronger, and more experienced martial artist. Not long into the battle, the boy was repeatedly hit and completely overwhelmed by the opponent. At the end of the first half, fearing that the boy would be injured, the referee signaled to end the match early, but his teacher did not agree. "Just let the boy continue," the master requested. Immediately after the match restarted, the opponent made a serious mistake. He underestimated his opponent and let his guard down. Immediately, the boy used his only martial arts to knock the opponent down and lock him on the floor. The boy won the championship. On the way home, the 2 teachers and students reviewed the fighting positions in each match. Only then did the boy muster up the courage to say the thing that had been haunting his mind for so long. "Teacher, how can I become a champion with just one martial art like that?" "I win for 2 reasons." The teacher replied, "The first reason is that I have almost mastered one of the most dangerous and effective moves in this martial art. The second reason is that the only way your opponent can break that stance is if they hold your left arm tightly, and I don't have a left hand." Sometimes someone's weakness becomes their greatest strength. Having advantages is a good thing, but being able to turn shortcomings into advantages is even more miraculous. Believe in yourself. You can do it all. Turn adversity into opportunities to help you achieve better things. Will Jolly. The good news. The meaning of life is not in what it brings us, but in what attitude we have towards it. It's not about what happens to us. It's about how we react to it. Lewis L. Dunnington. Turn adversity into opportunities to help you achieve better things. Will Jolly. A student who had just graduated from university and was looking for a job participated in a specialized creative competition organized by a federation of universities across the country. After many month-long preliminary rounds, he was included in the group of best people to participate in the final round. Then he struggled to overcome his opponents in the final battle of wits, which lasted 3 tense days, and won the first prize. His reward was a large amount of money that he had never dreamed of in his student life. After leaving the hall and quickly hiding from the camera lights of the press, he entered the parking lot to leave. Suddenly, a woman approached him. She choked up. "Uncle, congratulations. It's an honor for you to have won first prize in this difficult competition. I have something I want to tell you, but I don't know if it's convenient. If you have young children, you will understand what I am about to say. My child is seriously ill with cancer and is in the hospital. If I didn't have such a large amount of money, so how much do you need?" The student looked at her and asked, truly sympathetic. After listening to the woman tell all the story, he immediately pulled out the envelope containing the money he had just received and gave it all to her. "Pray for your child to overcome danger. Please go home and take care of her right away." I said, "Thank you. I don't know how I can repay you." After a moment of silence, the young man asked again, "It's true that no child is sick to the point of death, right?" "That's right. I guarantee it," the man assured. "Oh, that's the best news I've heard all day," said the young man. Then he added, "We should celebrate because no child has to die." The heart of a child. A single woman moved to a new apartment. The girl saw that next door was a poor family, a widow and 2 children. One night, There was a sudden power outage in that area, and the woman had to light the candles herself. A moment later, she heard someone knocking on the door. It turned out to be the child next door, enthusiastically asking, "Miss, do you have candles at home?" The woman thought, is their family so poor that they don't have candles? The girl was worried that if she helped once, she would be bothered more by neighbors asking for help later, so she said, "Or not." Just as she was about to close the door, the poor child smiled lovingly and said, "I knew your house wasn't there." Having finished speaking, the boy held out his hand and held out 2 candles. "We were afraid that you lived alone and didn't have any candles, so I brought 2 candles for you." The woman blamed herself and was moved to tears, hugging the boy tightly in her arms. Elderly couple staying at the hotel. Late one night in early spring, an old couple entered a hotel, but the hotel was full. They initially wanted to leave to find another place to stay, but the waiter at the front desk led them into a room and said, "Maybe not the best room, but at least you two won't have to struggle to find a room anymore." When the two saw the neat and clean room, they became happy again. The next day, when they checked out and settled, the waiter said, "No, you don't need to pay because it's my room. Wishing you a happy trip." Double quotes. It turned out that he had spent the night in Yantan to relax in the old couple's room. The old man was very moved and said, "Lu is the best hotel operator I have ever seen. You deserve to be rewarded." The receptionist smiled and saw the old man out, turned around and immediately forgot what he had just helped others. One day, he received a letter with a one-way ticket to New York. When following the address in the letter, the receptionist saw a tall, magnificent building. It turned out that that night, he gave up his room to a billionaire and his wife. That rich man bought a big hotel for the receptionist and was confident that he would manage his hotel well. This is the legendary story of the famous Hilton Hotel and his first manager. Cause and effect is actually in your own hands. When successful people have not clearly defined their big goals in life, they do what they have now with all their heart. Everyone is a helper, and greatness always begins with helping others first. The greater a person's ability to help others, the greater his or her lifelong achievements will be. Each person's life is destined to go through many things. On the way there can be loud laughter, there can be tears of lament, there can be faith and success, and there can be vigilance before falling. Each experience is precious. If you want to be loved, you must first love others. If you want to be cared for by others, you must first care for others. If you want to be treated well by others, you must first treat others well. The Neighbor's Help, a story of unity and humanity. Mr. Miguel lived alone in a small, peaceful village in southern Spain. His wife had passed away many years ago, and his children had grown up and moved to faraway cities. At 75, his health was not what it used to be, but he still managed to take care of himself and maintain the house he and his wife had built together. One autumn afternoon, while gardening, he slipped and fell hard. The sharp pain left him unable to get up. Mr. Miguel tried to call for help, but his voice weakened and no one heard him. For hours, he lay there, hoping someone would pass by and find him. As evening fell, Mrs. Rosa, the neighbor next door, noticed the unusual silence from Mr. Miguel's house. Usually at this time, he would be sitting on his porch reading or tending to his flowers. Worried, Mrs. Rosa decided to check on him. As she approached his garden, she heard faint groans and quickly found him lying motionless on the ground. Without hesitation, Mrs. Rosa called another neighbor, Mr. Luis, for help. They carefully lifted Mr. Miguel and took him to the nearest hospital. The doctor concluded that he had a broken hip and needed immediate surgery. After a successful operation, Mr. Miguel was informed that he would need to stay in the hospital for at least a week and that it would take months for him to fully recover. Knowing Mr. Miguel had no one to take care of him, the entire village decided to come together to help. Mrs. Rosa and Mr. Luis took turns visiting him in the hospital, bringing his favorite foods and encouraging him during his recovery. Meanwhile, other neighbors took turns looking after his house and garden. They mowed the lawn, watered the plants, and made sure everything was neat and tidy. After being discharged from the hospital, Mr. Miguel returned home with a crutch, but his heart was full of warmth and gratitude. He couldn't do everything on his own as before, but he never felt alone. Every day, neighbors would stop by, bringing delicious meals, helping with household chores, and spending time with him to keep him from feeling lonely. The whole village organized a small party to welcome Mr. Miguel back home. At the party, Mr. Miguel was moved to tears and thanked everyone for the help and love they had given him. He realized that even without his family around, he had a much larger family, the entire community of this small village. Mr. Miguel's story spread throughout the region, becoming a symbol of humanity and unity. It reminded everyone that no matter how difficult life gets, we can overcome it if we lean on each other and share kindness. And in the darkest times, the help and love from those around us can bring light and hope. The Kind Stranger, an encounter on the night train. Anna, a 24-year-old young woman, was on a night train from Paris to Berlin to visit her friends. This was her first time traveling alone, and she felt a bit anxious, but also excited. After arranging her luggage in the compartment, Anna chose a seat near the window and began reading a book to relax. The train moved through the dark night, the dim lights in the carriage creating a peaceful atmosphere. Around midnight, when most passengers were asleep, a strange man entered the carriage. He sat opposite Anna and started staring at her, making her uncomfortable. She tried to focus on her book, but couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The man began talking to Anna, initially asking casual questions but quickly becoming inappropriate and harassing. Anna tried to refuse and asked him to leave, but he became aggressive and tried to coerce her. The other passengers in the carriage pretended to sleep or looked away, too afraid to intervene. In this tense situation, a middle-aged man named Klaus, sitting at the end of the carriage, had been observing the situation from the start. He stood up, approached, and firmly demanded the strange man leave Anna alone. The harasser, seeing Klaus's serious and determined demeanor, eventually backed off, leaving Anna pale with fear. Klaus sat down opposite Anna and gently asked if she was okay. She trembled but managed a smile and thanked him. Klaus introduced himself as a former police officer who had worked in national security. He shared that he had encountered many dangerous situations in his career and understood the importance of helping others. Klaus spoke about his years of service in the police force, the dangerous situations he had faced, and the lessons of courage and kindness he had learned. He explained that he always believed everyone had a responsibility to help others in need. They talked through the night, Klaus sharing his memories and Anna opening up about her life and dreams. Gradually, Anna's fear faded, replaced by deep gratitude and respect for Klaus. When the train arrived in Berlin the next morning, Klaus helped Anna with her luggage and escorted her out of the station. Before parting ways, Anna thanked Klaus again, saying she had learned a valuable lesson about courage and kindness from him. Klaus just smiled and said, "The world will be a better place if we stand up for each other." Anna walked away, carrying with her a newfound warmth and faith in people. She knew that, thanks to the help of a stranger, she had learned the value of kindness and was ready to help others in the future. The story of the encounter on the night train from Paris to Berlin became an unforgettable memory in Anna's life. reminding her that kindness and courage can appear anywhere and from anyone, even from strangers. Lesson from the disaster: humanity in the flood. Clara lived with her husband and 2 young children in a beautiful village along the Rhine River in Germany. Her family had lived here for generations, and their quaint old house was filled with cherished memories. Clara loved nature and the peaceful life by the river, but she was also well aware of the potential dangers posed by the rising waters. One early autumn day, continuous heavy rains caused the Rhine to swell. News of an impending flood spread quickly through the village, and people began preparing for the worst. Clara and her family tried to move their valuable belongings and stock up on supplies for emergencies. Early that morning, the floodwaters arrived faster and more ferociously than expected. Clara and her family were forced to evacuate as the water started to invade their home. They rushed to the nearest shelter, along with many other village families. In the dark of night, Clara heard her daughter's cries and saw the fear on her husband's face. The sense of loss and helplessness nearly overwhelmed her. At the shelter, Clara's family was welcomed by volunteers and rescue workers. They provided dry clothes, food, and temporary lodging. Despite this, the feeling of loss weighed heavily on Clara's mind. She worried about her family's future and didn't know when they could return to their beloved home. In the days that followed, Clara and her family gradually witnessed the warmth and solidarity within the community. Despite facing difficulties themselves, neighbors shared food and supported each other. An elderly neighbor, Mrs. Marta, brought homemade bread to Clara's family. Mr. Hans, a village carpenter, volunteered to repair and reinforce the temporary shelters to ensure everyone's safety. Clara also saw young people in the village working together to clean up and restore heavily damaged areas. They worked tirelessly from dawn to dusk, hoping to bring stability back to the community. Witnessing these acts, Clara felt the love and sacrifice of those around her. One day, Clara decided to join the volunteers to help others. She started by preparing meals for families in the shelter and assisting with childcare. Gradually, Clara realized that she was not only a recipient, but also someone who could give back, bringing hope and joy to those around her. Through these difficult days, Clara learned a valuable lesson about unity and humanity. She realized that in the toughest times, helping each other is the most important thing. Clara not only regained her faith in life, but also understood that everyone has the strength to overcome adversity when they share and support one another. As the floodwaters receded and life slowly returned to normal, Clara and her family returned to their home. Although they faced significant damage and a long road to recovery, she no longer felt alone. Clara knew that with the love and unity of the community, they would overcome any hardship and rebuild a better life. The story of the flood was not just a sad memory, but a profound lesson about the power of humanity and solidarity, reminding Clara and everyone that in times of disaster, kindness and mutual support are the greatest strengths. A call for help, a tale of courage and community. In the remote countryside of Poland, Marta, a single mother, lived a quiet life with her young son, Jacob. They resided in a small, rustic cabin on the outskirts of a village, surrounded by vast fields and dense forests. Winters in this region were notoriously harsh, but Marta had always managed to get through them with careful preparation and determination. One particularly brutal winter, a fierce snowstorm hit the region, catching Marta and Jacob off guard. The snow piled up quickly, creating an impenetrable barrier around their home. As the storm raged on, their supplies dwindled, and the electricity went out, leaving them isolated and increasingly desperate. Days passed, and the snow continued to fall relentlessly. The phone lines were down, and they had no way of reaching out for help. Marta tried to stay strong for Jacob, but the fear of running out of food and the bitter cold gnawed at her. She wrapped Jacob in layers of blankets, telling him stories to keep his spirits up, while she silently prayed for a miracle. On the fourth day of the storm, their situation became critical. The food supply was nearly exhausted, and Marta knew they couldn't survive much longer without help. In a moment of despair, she attempted to trek through the snow to find help, but quickly realized it was a futile effort as she could barely move through the deep drifts. Meanwhile, in the nearby village, Janusz, a farmer who lived alone after losing his wife a few years earlier, noticed that Marta and Jacob's cabin had been eerily silent. He knew the storm had been particularly brutal and worried about the isolated family. Janusz was known for his stoic demeanor and self-sufficiency, but he also had a kind heart. After what felt like hours of battling the elements, Janusz finally reached Marta's cabin. He found Marta and Jacob huddled together, shivering and weak. Marta's eyes filled with tears of relief and gratitude as she saw Janusz at the door. Without wasting any time, Janusz helped them onto the tractor, wrapping them in extra blankets he had brought along. The journey back to the village was slow and arduous, but Janusz's determination never wavered. He spoke soothingly to Jacob, who clung to his mother, reassured by the presence of their rescuer. When they finally reached Janusz's warm farmhouse, Marta and Jacob were overwhelmed by the warmth and comfort. Janusz's neighbors quickly rallied to support the small family. They brought food, clothes, and offers of help. The village community came together, showing Marta and Jacob that they were not alone. In the days that followed, Marta and Jacob stayed with Janusz, who ensured they were well fed and safe until the storm passed and it was safe to return home. This harrowing experience taught Marta the true meaning of community and solidarity. She realized that even in the most isolated places, people could come together to support one another in times of need. Janusz's brave and selfless act not only saved their lives, but also forged a bond of friendship and gratitude that would last a lifetime. As spring arrived and the snow melted, Marta and Jacob returned to their cabin, now filled with new hope and a renewed sense of belonging. The kindness and bravery of Janusz and their neighbors had shown them the power of unity and the importance of helping each other through life's storms. The Sacrificial Father, a tale of love and community. In a quaint village nestled amidst the tulip fields of the Netherlands lived Hans, a single father dedicated to raising his young son, Peter. Hans was a man of humble means, working long hours as a carpenter to provide for Peter. Despite the hardships, their small home was filled with love and laughter, and Hans did everything he could to ensure his son had a happy childhood. One crisp autumn day, Hans noticed that Peter seemed unusually fatigued and had lost his usual zest for life. Concerned, Hans took him to the village doctor. The news was devastating. Peter was diagnosed with a rare and serious heart condition that required an urgent and expensive surgery to save his life. Hans's world shattered. He was determined to do whatever it took to save his beloved son. Hans's heart ached as he looked at Peter, who, despite his illness, still managed to smile and reassure his father that everything would be okay. Desperation led Hans to contemplate selling the most precious possession he owned, a family heirloom, an antique pocket watch that had been passed down through generations. This watch was more than just a timepiece. It was a symbol of his family's legacy and history, a link to his ancestors. With a heavy heart, Hans visited the local antique dealer, who offered a substantial amount for the watch. Though it pained him deeply, Hans was ready to part with it for the sake of Peter's health. As he walked back home, he couldn't shake off the sadness of losing a piece of his family's history. News of Hans's plight spread quickly through the tight-knit village. The townsfolk, who had always admired Hans's dedication to his son and his quiet strength, were deeply moved by his predicament. Unbeknownst to Hans, they began to organize a community fundraiser to help cover the cost of Peter's surgery. The village square became a hub of activity as people from all walks of life came together. They held bake sales, organized auctions, and even put on a talent show to raise money. Children sold lemonade and handmade crafts, while local businesses donated a portion of their profits. The spirit of the community shone brightly as everyone pitched in, driven by a common purpose to help Hans and Peter. On the day Hans was to sell the watch, he received a call from the town mayor asking him to come to the village square. Confused but hopeful, Hans made his way there with Peter by his side. As they arrived, they were greeted by a large crowd. The mayor stepped forward, holding an envelope in his hand. "Hans," the mayor began, "we have heard about your difficult situation, and we want you to know that you are not alone. The people of this village have come together to help you and Peter." He handed Hans the envelope, which contained a significant amount of money enough to cover Peter's surgery and more. Tears welled up in Hans's eyes as he looked around at the familiar faces of his neighbors and friends. Overwhelmed with gratitude, he clutched the envelope tightly and hugged Peter, who beamed with joy and relief. The antique pocket watch, safely tucked in his pocket, seemed to pulse with the collective heartbeat of the community that had come together in their time of need. Peter underwent the surgery, and thanks to the skilled doctors and the unwavering support of the village, made a full recovery. As he grew stronger each day, the bond between father and son deepened, fortified by the love and generosity they had experienced. The pocket watch remained with Hans, not just as a family heirloom, but now as a symbol of the kindness and unity of their community. Whenever Hans looked at it, he was reminded of the profound lesson he had learned, that true wealth is not measured by possessions, but by the strength of the connections we build with those around us. Years later, when Peter was older, Hans told him the story of the watch and the village that saved his life. Peter listened intently, understanding the deep significance of their neighbor's generosity. He vowed to carry forward the legacy of kindness and to always be there for others, just as the village had been there for them. And so, in that small Dutch village, the tale of Hans and Peter became a cherished story passed down through generations, a testament to the power of community, love, and the enduring human spirit. We were only inconvenienced for 3 hours. That day, the wife and her husband booked a ticket to his hometown. Getting into the car, the two saw an old woman sitting in the husband's seat. The husband signaled his wife to sit next to the old woman and did not ask her to give up her seat. The husband just stood during the bus ride from Chiang to Taipei and let the old lady sit still in his seat. The husband just stood during the bus ride from Chiang to Taipei and let the old lady sit still in his seat. The wife looked closely and saw that the old woman's right leg was not good, and she suddenly understood why her husband did not ask the old woman to give her his seat. When he got out of the car, the new husband said to his wife, "Other people are inconvenient all their lives. These 3 hours of inconvenience for us are nothing." When the husband said that, the wife was very touched. Having a good and kind husband makes her feel incredibly lucky. In life, everything has the ability to change depending on how we think and change ourselves. We won't be successful in just 3 hours, but if we just spend 3 hours helping others, chances are our lives will turn around thanks to our kindness. The Unexpected Gift, a story of kindness. In a bustling city full of noise and haste, lived a man named Tom, who worked as a software engineer in a large corporation. Tom's life was filled with deadlines, meetings, and the constant hum of technology. Despite the busyness, he always tried to find a moment of peace during his lunch breaks, sitting on a bench in a nearby park. One chilly autumn day, as Tom was enjoying his sandwich, he noticed an elderly woman sitting on a bench across from him. She seemed frail and was shivering slightly in the cold. Tom watched as she fumbled with a thin, worn-out coat, trying to keep warm. His heart ached seeing her struggle, but he hesitated, not sure how to approach her. The next day, Tom decided to bring an extra blanket from home. As he entered the park, he saw the woman again, in the same spot, still battling the cold. Gathering his courage, Tom walked over and gently offered her the blanket. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said softly. "I noticed you might need this to keep warm." The woman looked up, her eyes widening in surprise and gratitude. "Thank you, young man," she replied, her voice quivering. "I don't know how to thank you," Tom smiled warmly. "Just stay warm, that's all I ask." Over the next few weeks, Tom and the elderly woman, whose name was Margaret, developed a friendly rapport. He learned that she had lost her husband a few years ago and had no close family. She lived alone in a small apartment nearby and often came to the park to reminisce about the time she spent there with her late husband. One particularly cold day, Tom noticed that Margaret was not in her usual spot. Concerned, he decided to visit her apartment. He found the address from a brief conversation they'd had. When he arrived, he knocked on her door, but there was no answer. Worried, he asked the building manager, who mentioned that she had been taken to the hospital the previous night. Tom hurried to the hospital and found Margaret in a small, dimly lit room. She looked weak and tired, but her face lit up when she saw him. "Tom," she whispered, "how did you find me?" "I was worried when I didn't see you in the park," he said, sitting beside her bed. "Are you okay?" Margaret smiled faintly. "Just a small health scare. The doctors say I need to stay here for a while." Tom hurried to the hospital and found Margaret in a small, dimly lit room. She looked weak and tired, but her face lit up when she saw him. "Tom," she whispered, "how did you find me?" Tom visited Margaret every day, bringing her favorite books, flowers, and homemade soup. His presence and kindness lifted her spirits, giving her the strength to recover. During these visits, they shared stories, laughter, and moments of silence that spoke volumes about their growing bond. One day, Margaret handed Tom a small, intricately wrapped package. "I want you to have this," she said. "It's something very dear to me." Tom opened the package to find a beautiful old pocket watch. "This belonged to my husband," Margaret explained. "He always said it was a reminder of the preciousness of time and the importance of kindness. I want you to have it because you embody that kindness." Tears welled up in Tom's eyes. "Thank you, Margaret. I will cherish this always." Margaret recovered and returned home, but their friendship continued to blossom. Tom's act of kindness had not only warmed Margaret during a cold autumn, but had also brought warmth to his own life. The pocket watch became a symbol of their bond and a reminder of the impact of simple, heartfelt gestures. In a world where everyone is caught up in their own lives, it is the small acts of kindness that create ripples of change. Tom and Margaret's story is a testament to the power of empathy and the lasting connections that can be forged through genuine care for one another. Through their friendship, Tom learned that kindness often returns to us in the most unexpected ways, and that the true measure of our humanity lies in our ability to reach out to others. And Margaret, once lonely and forgotten, found joy and companionship in the generosity of a stranger who became a dear friend.